Ricky, I have some black plastic tongs that'll be very gentle for the kitty cat. I think with those tongs, I can grab the kitty by the nape of the neck, like the mother does, and just take the cat right out from 5 feet away.
Oh, please, dude. Oh, no! Not there. Oh, God.
Reality television has one fatal weakness, and Billy the Exterminator has exposed it. For years, the show looked like one of reality television's safest bets. It was led by a memorable personality, had a real family business, and had an audience that kept coming back. Then, suddenly, it was gone. There wasn't even a proper ending. But upon closer examination, this story was never really about television. So what actually happened behind the scenes? And could the show have survived at all? Join us as we reveal the real reason Billy the Exterminator ended. The man everyone loved. William Billy Bretherton was a metalhead in the truest sense of the word. With his long dark hair, all black leather clothing, heavy jewelry, spikes and studs on everything he wore, and dark sunglasses, he didn't look anything like a pest controller. He looked like someone who was heading to a concert rather than into someone's backyard to deal with a rogue alligator or a nest of venomous snakes under a porch. Before television, Billy had already built a life that was more interesting than most people's. He joined the U.S. Air Force at 19, where evaluations flagged a natural aptitude for biology and entomology. He rose to senior airman, trained practically in pest control, and left military service with real knowledge that most exterminators spend years trying to acquire in the field. He returned to Louisiana and joined Vexcon Animal and Pest Control, the family business his parents, Big Bill and Donnie, had built, with his brother Ricky working alongside him. Vexcon was not just a company. It was the gravitational center of the entire Breton family operation, where the family worked, and where Billy's professional identity was completely grounded. Television found him through Discovery Channel's Dirty Jobs with Mike Rowe, where Billy appeared and immediately demonstrated something networks spend fortunes trying to manufacture: natural charisma in front of a camera. A&E noticed, and in 2009 they launched The Exterminators and rebranded it as Billy the Exterminator from Season 2 onward. The ratings climbed fast. For 6 consecutive seasons, that show ran almost entirely on the fuel of Billy's genuine personality and the genuine reality of his family's life in Louisiana. There were no gimmicks. Unlike other reality shows, there was no need to manufacture conflict. All people saw was a real person doing a real job with his real family in a real place. That's exactly what made it so fragile. A&E had stumbled onto something they couldn't manufacture, and, as it would turn out, didn't fully understand the responsibility of having. But that success depended on something far more fragile than ratings. Why the show worked. People who watched Billy the Exterminator would describe the experience as, "It just felt good." And while that is true, the mechanics behind that feeling were more deliberate than they appeared. 2 things held the show in place: the environment around Billy and Billy's family. Each episode followed Billy and his crew through multiple pest control calls, and Louisiana provided something genuinely valuable, which was a variety that required no invention. The climate and ecosystem of Louisiana produce pest and wildlife situations most of the country never encounters. Giant fire ant colonies, nutria rats and drainage ditches, venomous snakes in suburban backyards, alligators that needed relocating, and massive beehive colonies inside occupied walls. The diversity of what Billy dealt with across 6 seasons meant the show never had to manufacture situations to fill airtime. The calls were real, the animals were real, and the stakes were often genuinely high. What separated the show from other pest-oriented programming was something unmistakable once you noticed it. Billy consistently refused to frame the animals as the enemy. He explained the biology behind whatever he was dealing with, used Latin names on camera without it feeling academic, and explained behavior patterns and ecological roles. His strong preference in almost every situation was humane relocation over extermination, removing creatures from places where they had become a problem, and returning them to environments where they could survive. That approach gave the show a warmth that similar programs simply did not have. Audiences were not just watching someone deal with pest problems. They were watching someone who genuinely cared about what he was doing and why. The production team was also aware of a structural challenge in the format. Since they never knew which footage from any call would make the final cut, Billy and his brother Ricky narrated their actions in real time while they worked, explaining the species, the behavior, and the removal method so key information would be captured regardless. It was a practical workaround that made the show more educational than it might otherwise have been. The family element was the second major pillar. His parents, Big Bill and Donnie, were warm and naturally funny on camera. His brother, Ricky, was a skilled exterminator and a genuine personality in his own right. Billy's wife, Mary, appeared in earlier seasons before stepping back, reportedly because she was uncomfortable on camera, though rumors of friction persisted. The entire production was built around one specific reality: one place, one family, one company, and one person at the center of it all. Across 6 seasons, the formula never needed to reinvent itself because it was working exactly as designed. By every external measure, the show should have continued. But then, reality interrupted the reality show. The arrest that changed everything. Everything began coming apart in 2012. It started with an incident that, on the surface, should not have been enough to end a successful television show. On the 28th of April, Bossier City Police responded to a 911 hang-up call at the Courtyard by Marriott Hotel at the Louisiana Boardwalk. Officers found Billy and his wife Mary in possession of suspected synthetic marijuana and drug paraphernalia. Both were arrested. According to the Seattle Times, Billy didn't contest the charge. He pleaded guilty quickly. The legal outcome was negligible at best: a $500 fine, community service, and, reportedly, some mandated rehabilitation. Charges against Mary appear to have been dropped or reduced. By any legal measure, that punishment was minor, the kind of thing that in most professions would barely register as a footnote. But Billy wasn't in most professions. He was the face of a reality television show, and that distinction matters more than people realize. When a scripted actor faces legal trouble, the character they play remains untouched. But when a reality television personality gets arrested, there's no such separation. The person is the product, and damage to the person is damage to the product. A&E had spent years carefully positioning Billy as an eccentric but lovable family man, passionate about his work and genuinely good at it. The arrest didn't destroy that image outright, but it complicated it in ways the network had no appetite to manage. The arrest was not what ended Billy the Exterminator. The charge was too small, the legal outcome too insignificant to bring down someone who had carried a show for 6 seasons on personality alone. But it was the moment A&E's priorities became visible. The timing couldn't have been more terrible. The arrest became public while Billy was still actively associated with the show. If it was an old story from before he rose to fame, it wouldn't have had any effect on the guy America had come to love. But it was current, and it ran in local and entertainment news. The network had to make decisions about how to handle it, and, from the outside, they appeared to have made the quiet decision to step back and let Billy handle himself. When things got uncomfortable, the network's instinct was self-preservation, not loyalty. Billy had given them 6 seasons of authentic television, and the moment his real life created a problem, they treated him as a liability rather than an asset worth protecting. That choice would define everything that came next. The arrest was the crack. What came after was the collapse. Why the show really ended. This is the chapter that matters the most, but surprisingly, it's the one that receives the least attention. In the months following his arrest and the unwanted public attention that surrounded it, serious tensions emerged within the Brotherton family. The specifics were never disclosed publicly, and Billy kept that side of things private in a way that suggested the wounds ran deeper than what fans thought. But the outcome was impossible to miss, and it was severe enough to effectively end the show on its own, independent of anything the network was deciding. Billy left VexCon entirely. He didn't temporarily step back or merely reduce his role. He practically separated from the family business his parents had founded in 1996. The company he had worked in for years, the company that was the entire premise and setting of the television show. His parents eventually retired from active involvement, but Ricky remained to manage VexCon going forward. Billy, on the other hand, relocated to Illinois, eventually settling in the Chicago area. Illinois is hundreds of miles from Benton, Louisiana. There was literally nothing connecting him to the show he once lived for. Billy the Exterminator was not a concept that could be transplanted. The entire identity of the series was tied to one specific reality, which was Billy Brotherton at VexCon in Louisiana with his family. These were the things that had kept the show going. Louisiana wasn't merely a filming location, it was the reason the show made sense. The Brotherton family wasn't a supporting cast. They were the entire emotional foundation the audience had invested in across 6 seasons. The moment Billy walked away from all of it simultaneously, he dismantled every element the show depended on to function, and production was left with nothing to rebuild around. Ricky attempted to keep something going with a YouTube series called VexCon The Exterminators in 2015, but it ran only 16 episodes and never found an audience. Without Billy as the central personality, the formula simply did not hold. The show was only ever as strong as the life it was documenting. What happened after that explains why the ending felt so unfinished. The betrayal from the network. There is a specific kind of ending that hurts more than a bad finale. It's the ending where nothing is said at all. Television networks sometimes operate in a way that audiences rarely see. And the way A&E managed the ending of Billy the Exterminator is proof of that. When the show was canceled without even a goodbye episode, audiences waited to hear the reason. But not only did the network make no public statement, they said nothing at all about why the show was canceled. Viewers were simply informed it was over, and that was it. It wasn't that they were negligent, though. They strategically chose to keep things quiet. Ever since the arrest, they appeared to have distanced themselves from the man who single-handedly carried the entire show. So if they had released a statement addressing the arrest or the family fallout, they would have been amplifying a story they desperately wanted to exit. The cost of that decision was that the audience drowned in confusion and unanswered questions, but the network couldn't care less about it. To make matters worse, in the same year Billy was arrested, Duck Dynasty had become a cultural phenomenon that generated a staggering amount of viewership that dwarfed almost everything else on the network. Naturally, the network's institutional attention and development resources were concentrated on protecting Duck Dynasty above everything else. Although Billy the Exterminator was a solid 6-season performer, it was not the flagship. So, when the situation became complicated and the real foundation of the show crumbled with Billy's exit, the network didn't have enough motivation to fight for it. They effectively discarded Billy and concentrated on what was making them money at the time. making it seem like Billy's skills were no longer as sharp as they once were. If A&E's silence left any room for doubt about how they valued Billy, what happened next removed it entirely. Canada proved the point. A few years after Billy disappeared from American television, Canadian network CMT came looking for him. They hadn't forgotten what A&E had quietly walked away from. They saw a proven talent who was still in his prime, still passionate about the work, and still completely himself. The result was Billy Goes North, a 12-episode series that premiered on CMT Canada in 2016. Billy was in a new country, facing new wildlife challenges with the same personality, and it worked like a charm. The show was well received, the format translated naturally, and Billy demonstrated in 12 episodes what should have been obvious to anyone paying attention. Contrary to what many assumed, Billy's television instincts had not diminished during the years away. He was still immediately recognizable as himself, still completely natural in front of the camera. That alone was damning enough for A&E. A Canadian network had identified and acted on value that they had abandoned. When Billy Goes North performed extremely well, A&E came back. They repackaged the Canadian series and aired it in the United States, presenting it to audiences as the 7th and final season of Billy the Exterminator. For fans who had been waiting since 2012 for any kind of return, it was something real, even if it felt slightly disjointed from where the original series had left off. But as much as fans would have liked to see Billy on the screen for a few more years at least, that one season was as far as the revival went. And again, A&E did nothing. They didn't recommission Billy. They invested nothing in him, developed no new format around him, or made any commitment to rebuilding what they had let collapse. They simply took content that a Canadian network had produced, repackaged it under their own banner, and presented it as a continuation of a show they had abandoned without explanation. After that repackaged season aired, Billy once again disappeared from television. Just like the first time, there was no finale, no announcements of additional seasons. Some fans speculated about some development deals, but none was ever confirmed. And worst of all, there was no indication whatsoever that a full return to the original format was in the works. Billy simply faded back out of public view like he was never there in the first place. Rebuilding a mainstream audience after that length of absence would have required real institutional commitment from A&E, a sustained promotional investment, and a willingness to bet on a personality whose peak had been several years earlier. The network was not prepared to make that bet. And that leaves one final question. What remains after the cameras leave? Where is Billy now? Billy Bretherton never made a comeback speech. He never gave an interview laying out his grievances with A&E or positioning himself as a victim of the television industry. He just kept working. Now in 2026, Billy Bretherton is 57 years old, and he is still in pest control, which is the one constant across everything. The family tensions that drove him out of Louisiana have healed. The official VexCon website now lists Billy, Ricky, and Billy's son Bryce as part of the current operation, based in Illinois. But the full picture of where Billy ended up compared to what he once had is a clear sign that is difficult to soften. His estimated net worth is somewhere between $250,000 and $500,000, depending on the source. For a man who was a nationally recognized television personality for 6 straight seasons on one of America's most watched cable networks, a man whose name was in the title of his own show and whose face was known to millions of people across the country, that figure is painful to say the least. His social media presence in 2026 is minimal in a way that reflects the complete absence of professional management or career development. His Instagram account has approximately 8,000 followers. That number for someone who once had millions of weekly viewers on a major cable network is a measurement of how far the distance runs. His son Bryce has built his own social media presence on TikTok, and Billy makes occasional appearances in his son's content. It's a very different kind of exposure than a weekly A&E series, but it keeps a connection alive between Billy and the audience that grew up watching the show. For every post Bryce makes, the comments are usually full of people who remember Billy the Exterminator and are glad to see he's still around. Bryce is essentially carrying the torch. He's the new generation of the same family, doing the same work. As for mainstream television, Billy Bretherton has shown no indication of returning to it. No new deals, no announced projects, no public campaign to reclaim the spotlight. Aside from his time with A&E and CMT, he has not been associated with many network deals. By every available signal, he has made peace with stepping away from that world. The man who once handled venomous snakes and relocated alligators for the entertainment of the country is now largely invisible to the industry that built its programming around his real life. And that industry, which profited from his real family as entertainment content and walked away when that real life got complicated, has never offered him anything resembling the ending he deserved. Billy the Exterminator deserved a proper ending. The audience that spent 6 seasons invested in that family deserved an explanation. And Billy Bretherton deserved a network that understood the difference between a liability and a person. He built a life worth watching. The people who were supposed to have his back looked away when it mattered. That's the real reason why Billy the Exterminator ended. And it has nothing to do with Billy as a person. Would the show still be on if not for the arrest? And what if Billy returned to the screen? Would you tune in to watch? Share your thoughts with us in the comments. Remember to like, share, and subscribe for more. Also, click the next video showing on your screen. You will enjoy it.